Imagine boarding not a ship, not a plane, but something in between. A floating city of the skies, with 1,500 passengers, garages for cars, observation decks, and even a launch bay for smaller planes. This wasn't just some fever dream, this was an actual plan for the future of air travel back in 1933. Engineers and newspapers across Europe and the US seriously proposed it, a flying ocean liner that could cross the Atlantic in just 13 hours. This is the story of the airliner so big, it makes a Boeing 747 look like a child's toy. Come aboard the flying transatlantic seaplane. When these images first hit magazines in the 1930s, they weren't presented with caution or caveats. They were presented as the future of air travel. Not just another airplane, but aviation's Titanic, a flying ocean liner that would replace ships entirely. It was bold, futuristic, and just believable enough to make people wonder, could this actually happen, or was it too good to be true? The design was splashed across magazines like The Sphere in 1933, and later in Luftfahrt International, and even Everyday Science and Mechanics in the US. The reality, it was more a publicity stunt than a blueprint, but the numbers they threw around were jaw-dropping. We're talking about a wingspan of 183 meters. That's 600 feet. It's almost twice the span of an Airbus A380. And the fuselage, it would be 100 meters long, which is longer than a football field. And to power it, it would have 12 propeller engines, supposedly producing 100,000 horsepower in total. For context, engines at the time managed maybe 1,000 horsepower each, on a good day, if they didn't shake themselves apart. Even the mighty Dornier d'Aux, the world's largest flying boat of the era, had 12 engines that barely made 7,500 horsepower combined. So was this the biggest leap in aviation history, or the biggest con ever sold to the public? But the artists didn't stop there. The dream was clear, a flying hotel in the sky. The capacity would be 1,500 passengers, plus crew, which is more than the Airbus A380 and a Boeing 747 combined. And all of this would be happening inside a machine that could hop across the Atlantic in 13 to 16 hours. And boy, I know you're just sitting there wondering what it was like to fly on board. Well, let's just say that you could bring your car along for the ride. Hey, it's me, Nick, here from FoundExplained. I'm on camera right now, so you know I'm not AI. Now, I mentioned that this aircraft had a catapult to launch small parasite planes. A few details of how this would work exactly, or what that aircraft would be, are a little bit limited, but the whole idea is pretty darn cool. It actually kind of reminds me of the boat from Porco Rosso that launches 2 fighter planes into the sky to fend off against pirates. How whimsical. Although throughout that scene and movie, I always wondered what would it be like to be a flying ace like the titular character. Well, it turns out, on Warthunder, you can. Warthunder is the most comprehensive free vehicle combat game ever made. They have a ton of machines, from biplanes, interwar tanks, to battleships, jet fighters, and even modern main battle tanks. You can select over 2,500 playable vehicles. That's a lot. And each of these machines is accurately modelled, so the damage is real, with engines, fuel tanks, and even pilots being susceptible to damage like real life, with a cool X-ray model showing each hit that you have had or dealt. There's also great customization and different game modes for every player, from arcade to realistic, and now there's an even mobile version that's even better to play on the go. My favourite part about Warthunder is the sheer chaos that we have when we play together, with many different people bringing together different aircraft and tanks into pure chaotic fun. And the best part is, to play with me, or 70 million other players in epic PvP competition, you don't need anything fancy, as Warthunder is free on PC, consoles, and now, of course, mobile devices. And I haven't come to you empty-handed. By using my code in the description or the pinned comment, new and returning players on PC and consoles that haven't played in the last 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, and 100,000 Silver Lions, as well as 7 days of premium account. It's only available for a limited time, so be quick. Come and play with me sometime on Warthunder. We'll be streaming it here on the channel. I'd love to see you in the action. So what would it actually be like to step aboard this monster? The artists and engineers behind the design didn't just imagine a plane, they imagined an entire city in the sky, and according to the drawings, here's what you would see if you went for a stroll. You'd start at the main entrance, walking up the gangways large enough to swallow a small town. Right away, you will notice the scale. This wasn't an aeroplane cabin, this was a multi-deck cruise ship with wings. Inside, the spaces were divided just like a liner. There were lounges and smoking rooms decorated with windows stretching the entire length of the promenade deck, and you could sit in reclining chairs looking out over the Atlantic and watching the ocean scroll past 5,000 feet below you. Moving further in and you'll find the dining saloon, a full-scale restaurant with waiters, white tablecloths and a kitchen to match. Nearby there were some gambling rooms, bars and even a smoking parlour tucked away for late night cigars. And if that wasn't enough, this thing had a garage for cars. Yes, in the 1930s they assumed you would drive straight onto your aeroplane, park your car and sail across the Atlantic. Why bother with airport parking when your plane carries its own? Their technical cutaways also show storage for mail and cargo, officers' quarters, machine rooms, and even catapults to launch small aircraft mid-flight, so the liner could send out scout planes or shuttles while still in the air. Useful if it's just about to fly over your stop. But the piece de resistance was observation decks built into the wings themselves. Imagine walking out into a gallery built inside of the wing, with horizontal windows cut into the fuselage, with reclining seats and nothing but the endless Atlantic horizon beside you. It was half airliner, half ocean liner, and half Bond villain lair. In short, a flying liner wasn't just the way to cross the Atlantic, this was to be the piece de resistance experience, a floating resort where passengers could dine, stroll, smoke, gamble, and relax, all while soaring above the waves in an aircraft the size of a skyscraper on its size. Of course, there's one small problem: making all of that actually fly. But before we get to the reality check, let's talk about why people thought that this giant would make a boatload of money. In the early 1930s, the Atlantic Ocean was still a barrier as much as it was a highway. If you wanted to cross from Europe to America, you had two choices: take an ocean liner, or don't go at all. The fastest ships of the day, the SS Bremen and the SS Europa from Germany, or Britain's soon-to-arrive RMS Queen Mary, could cross in just under 5 days. These ships were marvels of engineering, racing each other for the Blue Riband, the prize for the fastest Atlantic crossing. On board, passengers enjoyed full-service dining, promenade decks, ballrooms, and the kind of comfort that was only possible on a floating city like a cruise ship. But aviation was catching up. By the late 1920s and early 1930s, aircraft produced by Dornier and other early flying boats hinted at what was to come. The Do-X, with its 12 engines, could carry over 150 people, but only for short distances and with enormous fuel consumption. Charles Lindbergh's solo flight across the Atlantic in 1927 had shown that an aircraft could cross the ocean, but not with paying passengers and not with safety or reliability. Their technical barriers were significant. Aeroplanes of the era faced challenges such as the inability to carry enough fuel for long transatlantic flights without drastically increasing weight, unreliable engine performance that could jeopardize safety, and materials like aluminium that couldn't support the structural stresses needed for a larger wingspan. At the time, the demand for transatlantic travel was exploding. With immigration to the United States still strong, businessmen wanted faster connections, and Europe's airlines, Lufthansa, Air France, and Imperial Airways, all dreamed of regular routes across the ocean to get a slice of that pie. The problem was obvious: flying boats and airliners were just too small. A regular aircraft of the day could only carry a handful of passengers at enormous cost. So the logic seemed irresistible. If ships could carry thousands profitably, why not aeroplanes? Why not scale aviation up to the same size as ocean liners? After all, a ship displacement water to float, a flying boat displaced air to stay aloft. In theory, bigger meant better. And of course, I need to point out to all the physics people and anybody else who's got their brain switched on that that's not at all how it works, but I'll get to that in a minute. This was the mindset of the era. Aviation is the next ocean liner, a replacement for the great transatlantic steamers. So obviously journalists and engineers imagined that the future would be these giant aircraft. It was a solution born from both ambition and necessity. And boy, was it going to make everyone filthy rich. On paper, it wasn't just a flying fantasy, it was also pitched as a flying business. The numbers dazzled investors and readers alike. 1,500 passengers per trip, each paying around 900 Reichsmarks, that's over 1.3 million Reichsmarks per crossing, and fares alone would be a fortune. That's $8,700 today per ticket, or 13.1 million US dollars per crossing. About 10 times what a real airliner makes today on one of the world's most busiest routes. Let's just say New York to London. Add cargo, cars, and lucrative mail contracts, and suddenly the flying liner looked like the most profitable aircraft ever conceived. Damn, where do I sign up as an investor? But as with all good sales pitches, the reality was very different. Let's take those engines. The proposal claimed 12 engines, delivering around 100,000 horsepower. The problem? In 1933, the world's best aero engines produced around 1,000 horsepower each. So unless somebody had secretly invented engines a decade ahead of their time, you would need closer to 100 engines strapped to this thing to make it fly. And imagine trying to service that in the mid-Atlantic with 1930s tools. In truth, it wasn't just optimistic, it was impossible. And then there was the structure. A 600-foot wingspan meant stresses no aluminium alloy of the era could handle. Even the contemporary seaplanes, a quarter of the size, struggled to get airborne when full. Water takeoffs? Forget about it. The spray alone would have destroyed the airframe. And let's be honest, trying to taxi a floating skyscraper into the open Atlantic would have been like asking an aircraft carrier to do a 3-point turn in a swimming pool. In other words, the entire project wasn't just optimistic, it was impossible. And yet, that's what makes it so fascinating. Because this wasn't really about the engineering, it was about the vision. It reflected the optimism of the 1930s, the belief that technology would solve anything, and that the age of the ocean liner was ending, and that aviation would take humanity to the next level. Of course, reality would choose a different path. Instead of one giant flying hotel, the skies were conquered by smaller, more efficient aircraft. By the late 1930s, the Boeing 314 Clipper proved that a flying boat could cross the Atlantic, but with only 74 passengers, not 1,500. And after the war, the jet age arrived with the Comet and the Boeing 707 carrying hundreds of passengers profitably and reliably. The dream of a flying liner quickly faded away. But those old drawings still stop you in your tracks, and they capture a moment where people believed the future would be bigger, grander, and almost utopian. A time when the idea of strolling down a promenade deck inside of an airplane wing didn't sound insane, but inevitable. This concept never flew, and it probably could have never flown, but as a vision of what aviation might have become, it remains one of the boldest, strangest, and most captivating ideas even put on paper. Were they crazy? Or were they just dreaming of a future that we all secretly still want today? Hey, before you go today on today's video, make sure to check out today's sponsor, Warthunder, and come and blow some tanks up with me this weekend. You can play the game now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile phones using my links in the pinned comment or the video description. And those that haven't played Warthunder yet or are returning after a break of at least 6 months, use my code to receive a massive bonus pack, including premium vehicles, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account.